Okay. So we're holding the end of the laws of a person who is let's reshare the page of a person who is not severely sick on Shabbos. Okay. How do we do this? Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Dealing with a person who's not the most tech. Let's see if we got this right. Someone's trying to get in. Hold on, just give me 1 second. Okay. All right, sorry about all that. Okay, so we're holding law number 16 about a person who's not severely ill. What are the laws with regard to medicine? Hold on, someone is trying to get in. Oh, here we go, Ariel. Okay. So it says a person who's sick, shenafel machmas chayla yemishka ve'em by sakana, means you're confined to your bed, but you're not critical. Again, the fundamental question over here is with regard to healing. Healing on Shabbos is not allowed. Why? Because medicines were made in a way that would typically violate the Shabbos. Yes, Aaron, you're on mute.
What's critical mean in the Torah?
No. Okay, critical. Anything life-threatening is critical. We're gonna get more to the definition of critical in the next chapter. But we're talking about if a person bedridden could be, you really feel awful. No one's concerned. You don't even have to call the doctor. You're really not feeling great. You're in bed. You could have the flu, etc. Things that could be a situation of not critical, but bedridden. Yes, Jonathan.
Yes, don't we agree, right? If you can say, right, if there's a Mishnah on Shabbos, they even brings down you're not allowed to take medicine on Shabbos, right? But nowadays, isn't it okay that's okay to take medicine on Shabbos and do other things? Okay, if a doctor prescribes medicine.
Okay, it depends on the illness. It depends what we learned this before. Depending on why you're taking the medicine, what's the situation? For instance, if it's something let's say there's certain conditions that if you don't continue to take them, then they become critical. They're kept in check because you've been taking the medicine. So there's a case by case situation. We're just talking about typically if you're allowed to do healing, that's not for a person of sakana. A person's not endangered, or it doesn't lead to that. Again, there are situations where, for instance, I'll give an example. I was listening to a radio show where Harav Agon Ravad Yosef's son has a radio show where he teaches halacha online here in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael. And so he takes questions, I think, sometimes. Usually he just gives a 2-minute thing. Someone called him up and asked him that this person needed a breathing machine for when they sleep. Because otherwise they could lose their breath while they're sleeping, could be dangerous. So he was trying to get the rabbi to tell him that he can't use it on Shabbos. He wanted that the rabbi should tell him that he cannot use it on Shabbos. He wanted the rabbi to be strict with him and say, no, it's not necessary because he says he could really sleep without it. And now the Rabbi Yosef was like, I'm not going to tell you that. Absolutely not. You have to take it. Even though it just keeps you, it's keeping you breathing. I mean, at that moment, it's just a concern, but he wasn't even going to listen for a second to this person's, so to say, I don't know why the person wanted to be strict. Some people like to be strict on themselves that he shouldn't use the machine, even though it was using electricity on Shabbos, and you had to set. I don't know the details of the machine, what have you. But the point is that if there's certain things that you're not critical, but if you don't have them, it could turn critical. So that maintaining a healthy situation is also allowed on Shabbos. Here we're just talking about, in general, a person who's not in sakana. You could be in bed and you're not in the sakana. It's not dangerous. And we all feel like that all the time. There's many times a person, for instance, today there's a big argument about allergies. Is allergies a good enough reason not to come to work because you have a bad case of a bad attack of allergies. Anyone who experiences allergies, and I had allergies from a child, will know that especially in different seasons, allergies could really, really disable your ability or your will to be functional. You really feel horrible. Are you in danger of something? Some people it could get dangerous in certain scenarios where it could affect your breathing, etc. But in general, most people, it's just a bad case of where it feels like a flu. So you could want to go to bed. And today, when we were younger, it wasn't recognized as an excuse not to go to school or to work. Today, it's getting a lot more respect than it used to. Either way, the person is confined to their bed because of their illness, but they're not in a situation of sakana. It's not critical. Another situation, which is similar, kind of the same idea, you have an ailment which causes the entire body to feel pain. Again, but you're not in a critical situation. Even if you're walking around, you feel like you're bedridden. You should be bedridden, let's say, right? We all feel, again, this is like when you're feeling, it's basically like feeling the flu, where you could be walking around taking care of your kids. You would love to be in bed. So what's the law in such a situation? So the Kitzur says, then if you need some sort of medicine, again, you have to remember this. Today, it's a little different when Tylenol is bought over the counter and Advil. All the medicines are available. We don't typically make medicines, although you could still go to the pharmacy and say, should we be prepared for you or not? But over here, we're talking about in a situation where the medicine has to actually be prepared. You could tell a non-Jew to prepare for you the medicine that would relieve you of this condition. We're not talking about, again, a critical, where you could feel better, right? You would feel better and not be bedridden or be more functional, etc. Let's say you need to eat. Hold on, I have the chats over here. Okay, I'll see the chats in a second. Or to cook for you if you need to eat. Because that today it's okay for a non-Jew to cook for you in this situation. Okay, hold on a second. Let's see the footnotes. Footnote number 3, we have 32, 33, and 34. Okay, first 33 is just as the reference, and we have the reference and the reference. Okay. So that's number one. Number one is you're allowed to have a non-Jew prepare the medicine and cook for you, even though you're not in a critical situation, but you're bedridden. So this is a non-Jew doing it for you. Obviously, a Jew cannot do it in this situation. And he adds to that, you're allowed to take medications or do anything necessary for the cure in this situation. Hold on, Aaron. So he says you may also take medications, do anything necessary for this cure, whether by himself or through someone else. But you're not doing anything that's violating the law. You can't even do rabbinic. But if there's a rabbinic prohibition that would help you relieve your situation, then then you have to use a Gentile. So the condition really 16 and 17 go together. A Gentile could cook for you and a Gentile could prepare medicine for you. Anything that's not rabbinic, what you're doing actually, because the whole idea of healing is a gzeira, is a concern that maybe you're going to violate. Here you know for sure you're not going to violate. You're not even doing a rabbinic violation. So we relieve the concern that with the gzeira that we put on healing on Shabbos because of your situation. But if in order for you to relieve yourself, you would have to violate even a rabbinic prohibition, that you're not allowed to do. You would have to find a Gentile to help you. Then you need a Gentile. What happens if there is no Gentile? You can't find one. So then he says to transgress a rabbinic prohibition, not biblical, rabbinic, you can do it in worst case scenario by shinoi, by doing it in the unusual manner, which would be, again, this helps prevent that you won't do it again. What is the underwriting the idea over here is your condition. So your condition, the Torah recognizes your discomfort, which is severe because you're holding a situation of being bedridden, you mamish can't function. So even if it's rabbinic, as long as you do with the shinoi makes sure that you're not going to get used to doing it, and you recognize that it's Shabbos. So then the Kitzur says it's allowed. We'll see 35, which obviously gives us a lot of points on this ruling about violating a rabbinic when you don't find the Gentile. But go ahead, Aaron, first.
Okay. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to light a fire. And if you don't turn on the fire for the Gentile, he can't cook for you because he'll make the food unkosher. So how do you do it?
No, so that's that's what he says over here. Kivan, if you look at the last words of the last previous law, Kivan shehutir loy hayoim abishal adei nudi, that the prohibition of a non-Jew cooking for you has been lifted because of your situation. Obviously, lighting a fire is a biblical prohibition. That's not allowed. In general, if you don't know, it's a good question that you asked. Why is it a good question that you asked? Although the answer is simple, that you cannot light the fire. But sometimes when we're in a situation like this, we're not sure what things, like the Torah gives you. This is when you have clean cut yes or no. This is, you can do this, you can't do. So you can do, you can't do. Right? A Gentile can't cook for you. But when the Torah is saying your condition allows for certain leniencies because of your condition, so then you're not sure what comes first and what comes second. Like your question. You don't want a Gentile to cook for you, so you're going to turn on the fire. But turning on the fire is biblical. It's a deraisa. Bishul akum is the rabbanon. You can't even compare the two. So it's very important to know. The rule of thumb is, if you have a question and you don't have a rabbi to ask, and you're in a situation, stop for a second and try to understand what is a more severe law and what is a less severe law. We always go with the less prohibition over the severe. So like in your question, of course, there would never be a place for you to light a fire, which is a biblical prohibition on Shabbos, which is chayv kares. That's punishable by death, versus bishul akum, which is obviously much more lenient. Always go with the lenient when you're in doubt. That makes sense, Aaron?
Yeah. So let me just see if I got this. So what you're saying is that because to keep the food kosher, you have to turn on the fire for them, but that's a lesser than lighting a fire on Shabbos.
Exactly, of course. Lighting a Shabbos is a clear verse in the Torah. Right? There's a clear verse. Of all the laws of Shabbos that's literally spelled out is the lighting of fire.
That I understand.
So I'm saying, so that's a biblical prohibition. Having a non-Jew cook for you is a rabbinic issue that was put on because of certain concerns of a gezerah. It's not a straight up biblical prohibition.
Well, my question is, let me just see if I understand this. What you're saying is that let's say you have a restaurant, so a Jew's there to turn on all the fire, and then the Gentile can cook for the Jew. So on Shabbos, if you're sick enough, because turning on the fire is a bigger sin, let them turn on the fire because that's a lesser sin of them turning on the fire and you eating their food.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But that's the reason I'm giving you this rule is because not always is the rabbi available. In general, ask. But if you don't always have someone to ask, especially when there's a critical situation, you don't have the time to ask. So for a second, just stop and try to look, what am I doing? What is considered a straight up biblical prohibition and what is more rabbinic? And then you could, even if you don't know, but try to use your common sense to understand. If you make, the famous story, they say Rabbi Kiva, right? Rabbi Kiva found a person on the floor. He was just becoming, Rabbi Kiva only started to learn Torah at 40, right? One of the beautiful stories about a person should never give up hope of studying Torah is Rabbi Kiva. He only started to learn. He didn't know anything until 40. And he became the great teacher. The whole Torah is Alibid Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Kiva, right? We learned that everything goes according to Rabbi Kiva, but that took time. And he became a student of Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua. He found the person on the floor, dead. Those days, what's with the Roman, what was going on, that wasn't an uncommon thing. So in his mind, he was thinking, what do I do? He didn't have anyone to ask. And he knew a Jewish person needs Jewish burial. So he thought the best thing for him to do was to drag his body to the cemetery and bury him. And that would be a great thing. He came back to his rabbis, Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shua, and told him what happened. They said, "Oi, with every time you schlepped him, it was like the worst thing you could have done was to bring him to burial. You have to bury him on the spot because to drag a body who passes away is so painful. So he just didn't know. He didn't know. He knew he had to bury. He just didn't know how to go about doing it. So sometimes if you don't know, stop for a second and think. You're not always going to have the right answer, or at least try to figure out what would make sense. Would it make sense to light a fire on Shabbos or to eat food that's cooked by a non-Jew? But just in here, you have to remember something else. If you look at the wording of the Kitzur, again, the Kitzur is not just like a short version of the law. It's he by putting it into short pen, you have to analyze every word. So here he says, Kivan shehuter lahayim abishal de'en Yehudi. In his situation, it's been permitted. It's hutter. No longer, it's not like I'm weighing the transgressions against each other. In this situation, it's not prohibited for that person to eat from a non-Jewish cook. Because of Shabbos and you're not allowed to fire, you have no other way. So it's not like, oh, I ate food from a non-Jew that cooked for me, because it's not a problem on Shabbos when that's your scenario. It's been hutter. It's been made permissible. Okay, but here we have a bigger question, which is the Kitzur's psak that if you can't find a Gentile, you're allowed to do a rabbinic violation you're allowed to transgress a rabbinical prohibition in order to prepare for yourself through a shinui, through doing it in an unusual manner. So let's see what others have to say about this ruling. Other poskim prefer a Jew doing a dirabanan in an altered manner rather than a non-Jew doing it in the usual way. So the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Taz and the Magen Avraham, two of the main commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, the three, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chafetz Chaim as well, but he's quoting the Taz and the Magen Avraham, that say that I'd rather have a Jew do a rabbinic prohibition than a non-Jew doing it the regular way, because the Jew is going to do it in an unregular way, and by doing it in a shinoi, it's not really being done, so therefore it's not really a transgression. But that's not the ruling of the Kitzur. The Kitzur says first try to find a Gentile. Some go as far to permit a Jew to do a deraisa. This is a chiddush, a biblical prohibition in an altered manner for a sick person. Then it doesn't finish off saying then having a Gentile. Who does he quote? He quotes the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is the Alter Rebbe, and we're going to learn in the next chapter when the situation becomes more critical. Obviously, it's the famous story. The Alter Rebbe went and cooked on Yom Kippur for a woman. He himself cut the wood and cooked because she needed to be fed. So that's old Da'iraisa. So either the Alter Rebbe says it's that it's permitted for a Jew to do a Da'iraisa in an altered manner for a sick person. He quotes it in Shulchan Aruch Harav 328:19. The Iglei Tal and the Tehillah David all hold as follows: where danger of a loss of a limb is involved, i.e., loss of a limb but not loss of life, one may rely on this opinion. So says Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal. Again, this is a little out of my depth as far as the information goes, because he's basically saying that the Alter Rebbe, that the Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is either limiting what the Alter Rebbe says or explaining. I have to see the wording, because if the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to do deraisa, deraisa for in an unusual manner for a person who's sick, I wouldn't limit that. But here he says where danger of loss of limb involved, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says you could go according to that opinion. All right, the Mishnah Berurah 328:85 implies that a derabanan is in an altered manner may be done even for one who is only slightly ill. Okay, so we see there's many opinions about, and not always do we have. Again, first of all, like I said in the ruling a few times before, when in doubt, especially if it's a situation of life and death, like is there a fire? It's happened more than once where fires break out and a person doesn't know what to do on Shabbos and runs to the rabbi. In the meantime, obviously the fire is not waiting for you to get the psak, right? The fire is not going to sit there waiting for you to come back and say, should you spill it out, spill water on it, or not spill water on it? The fire does its thing and starts burning, and there's more than that could cause a loss of life. When in doubt, just if you even have a suffix of a suffix, a doubt of a doubt where someone's life, again, not property, but someone's life is in danger, and smoke inhalation, etc., is considered that as well, just put out the fire. Don't be so frum. But here, the Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, which is he was the posek of passed away, I think, in the early 90s. His paskins that that if even if a loss of limb, you could use the psak of the Alter Rebbe to be even over the Iraisa in a way of shinui. I don't know if the Alter Rebbe gives that limitation, so we go according to the Alter Rebbe. I'm not sure why the Chabad.org would put that down. Okay, that's Jonathan. You had a question?
Yes, whether if one had on Shabbos Yom Tov, right? They came down with 100 fever, let's say, right? They couldn't take a Tylenol or an aspirin, right? They should just sweat and burn, and just suffer and not enjoy Shabbos and Yom Tov. Are you allowed to take an aspirin or a Tylenol for a high fever or roughly?
Yeah. So, fever and stuff. Yes, you're allowed to take. We'll learn that, and it's gonna be addressed in the next chapter. I think it's the next chapter, or next chapter. We're gonna read about that in the next chapter. That fever is also something that should be addressed, and you could take a Tylenol or Advil for that. Okay, now like this. For all those who are pro or against vaccines, here we go. Roife ein Yehudi shu matzmiach markiv aba boys. I don't know if anyone knows familiar that today there's an outbreak. I mean, some of us have children, some of us don't. But either way, there's been an outbreak of smallpox, right? In the smallpox and measles. So even in the times of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, they already developed a vaccine for it. So what it seems like what happened was it doesn't have like today where you have, you go to your doctor and set up a pre-appointment to be vaccinate your children, but the doctor would travel from city to city. What happens if the doctor shows up to do the vaccination on Shabbos? So Roife ein Yehudi shu matzmiach markiv ababuis belatrin umfen, these Yiddish words, basically the vaccine for smallpox, liyilodim, to give the children the vaccine. If you could pay this traveling doctor or whatever when they set up their little let's say tent like they do to give the vaccines, and you could pay them off. Shabbos that they should push it off to vaccinate the children on Sunday. Yasikain, you should do so. It means if you can, whatever. But the point is, if you could get the doctor to agree to push off the vaccination process to Sunday, that's best. However, if he's not interested or she, Vimlav, Shabbos, and the only day to vaccinate the children would be on the Shabbos. So listen to halacha. This is halacha in Torah. This is Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I'm not giving an opinion. I'm just telling you what it says. Don't hold the child. Elaine Yehudi. Yachsikoi. Let someone else hold. You shouldn't be holding your child when he or she gets vaccinated, but someone else can, and you can vaccinate on Shabbos. Just wanted to say, again, I'm not giving an opinion. Some of my own children don't vaccinate their kids based on the argument of if it's okay to vaccinate or not. I'm not going to get into that conversation, but we see that in halacha recognizes the importance of vaccination, so much so that even though you shouldn't be vaccinating the kids on Shabbos, if there's no other choice, you could even vaccinate on Shabbos. Take that as you like. Okay, in footnote number 36 is he brings down he adds that if a non-Jew is unavailable, a Jew may hold a child. Okay, obviously. All right. Any questions before we go to the next chapter?
Yeah. Why do they bring up children and not adults? Because there are adults of vaccinations that you need to take.
Okay, so that's a good question. So you could learn from this one or two things. Is this a law about all vaccinations? Which means to say that in any time the government says you should vaccinate for X, Y, and Z, that overrides the Shabbos, or we're talking about only vaccinations for critical situations. What defines critical, I don't know. Here he's talking about smallpox. Smallpox was kids were dying in smallpox. So he's talking about what was normal in those days. But you could take it as, I think there's more to discuss. Could a person take their child to the pharmacy today? Let's say in Seattle, you go to your local pharmacy where they set up for vaccination and say, well, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says that if it's and if I can't just get the pharmacy to do it for me on Sunday and there's no appointments on Sunday, there's only on Shabbos, so then I could drive my child down there so I could or walk my child down to get the vaccine for smallpox. you have to ask your rabbi before you do anything rash like that. The point over here is we're talking about where the children were dying from the smallpox. It was recognized in those days that the children were saved because of the vaccine, and so therefore they paskined that if that's the only day that they could get it, they could get it and try to have someone else hold the child. If not, then you could hold the child. How does that apply to, let's say, a COVID shot? And how does it apply to any, the argument, are vaccines really good, necessary, harmful, helpful? That's that you have to ask on a case-to-case basis how they would paskin vis-a-vis Shabbos. I'm talking about, we're learning the laws of Shabbos, not the laws of vaccine. Learning the laws of Shabbos. But it would seem to be the accepted rule at the time of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, and he put it into Torah, because it's the book of law, and this is part of Torah, that vaccinating for smallpox and for the effects of smallpox was lifted. The idea of not taking medicines or vaccines on Shabbos was lifted because of the severity of the possibility of the children catching smallpox.
My quick question is, again, I'm not worried about if you agree or disagree with the vaccines. My question is they mention children and they don't mention adults. They could have made a small paragraph about adults.
Again, because it's a good question. So I'm going to just answer what I think. Hold on, Jonathan, get to you in a second. I'm just going to answer to what I think. My opinion is the reason why I didn't answer it is either you could say that they weren't vaccinating adults then for illnesses. Let's say the flu shot. So that you're asking a question about an adult. What about an elderly adult that to get the flu is dangerous? Of course, you could take a flu if you need a flu shot, and the only way to get it is on Shabbos. And you're talking about a person that could get sick, and Chas v'Shalom it could be dangerous for an elderly person to get the flu. So again, but you have to ask your rabbi lechatchila for this, because I'm not this. You're right. There's a lot of room in this law that it's not clear why he said smallpox and he talks about children. There's 2 points. One is an adult doesn't have to be held. So we're talking about holding the children. Number 2 is it seems like that was the risk. They weren't vaccinating adults then, maybe, possibly, for things that were critical. That's what I could answer. Do you want to get deeper? That is there anywhere to say over here that if there was something that was critical for adults like children, and it was clear that the vaccine was the way to heal it, that you couldn't take it on Shabbos, I would think you could apply it to the adults also. If you ask. Yes, Jonathan.
Yes, right. If you have a stuffed nose or a runny nose or a sore throat, all right, I'll tell you off the cuffs, it would be very hard to enjoy on Shabbos and everything. So you can say, well, for a stuffed nose, all right, it's no big deal and everything. Don't take medicine for it. Don't take any treatment for it, and just have a lousy Shabbos or Yontif.
Okay, I hear what you keep on asking, which is Oneg Shabbos versus taking medicine. So Oneg Shabbos, as important as it is not enough of a reason. We're not looking at Oneg Shabbos. We're looking at the misery you're in, a person would be in for being bedridden. That's the criteria, not Oneg Shabbos.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, the stuff those, all right. Don't feel too comfortable, all right. It's very uncomfortable.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. So the question is, if that would be considered bedridden. What happened over here? Hold on. Do you not see me? Do you hear me?
I see me.
Aaron, do you hear me?
Yeah, you're perfect. You can't get any better.
I hear you, Rabbi.
Okay, I'm not sure what's going on over here. Looks like there's something on this. Hold on.
There's nothing stopping you. You are perfect.
Hold on a second. Let me see what's going on. I think I pushed something on the settings here.
Didn't change anything on my iPad.
All right. Hold on.
Maybe learn the halachas of Shabbos, right, and learn how to make a tea, okay, without being over ambitious.
Hold on one second, guys. I'm gonna have to unshare it and share it again. 1 second. Let me see if this helps it.
Wait, you're on the wrong page?
No, I'm not seeing myself on the screen. Hold
well,
on.
we see you. You look fine.
Me? Okay. If you see me, that's all that counts. All right, let's go. And now we're gonna go into the next laws. The laws are laws pertaining to the critically ill, right? So we were learning until now the people that were not critically ill. So now we're talking about the critically ill, and laws of forced transgressions, meaning to say what's forced transgressions. Forced transgressions means you're being forced to transgress on Shabbos. Okay, let's see. So let's see how this applies to Shabbos. Okay, so it says like this. The chuya hi Shabbos eitzos chanas nefashos. Number one rule is like this: Shabbos gets suspended when there's any question of loss of life. Kamoi shar kol mitzvah Torah, and this applies not just to the laws of Shabbos, but this applies to the laws of anything of Torah. That if there's a question of loss of life, therefore loss of life comes first. We'll see the basis of all this. Lachain, therefore, chayle sheish b'sakana v'hu adam kosher. If you have a person who's sick and their life is in danger, and he is, and so I want to see how he uses the word in English, not so good. An observant person. Let's put that as on let's put a pin on that criteria in this for a second. Even if this person will sometimes do a transgression in general, not talking about Shabbos, but in general, for because of temptation, not because you're angry at God. There's two reasons the Torah describes a person who sins. One is lahachis, because you just want to anger God, and another one is l'te'avin, because I'm not eating a cheeseburger because chas v'shalom, because I want to anger God. I'm eating a cheeseburger because I want a cheeseburger. So that's called l'te'avin. Whereas when we learned in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, we had certain kings that said to God, looked in the Torah, how could I anger God? And by angering God, so now I have now I have a way to upset him by doing this avera. So we're talking about a person who's basically, even if they sin because they're just giving in to their desires. Even if it's only 1 day old child, mitzvah. It's not only permitted; it's a mitzvah. It's a commandment. Lechalel alav as a Shabbos, to transgress the Shabbos for this person, he or she. Even if it's a child 1 day old, you're allowed to transgress the Shabbos to keep this person alive. What happens if the sick person says, no, don't transgress the Shabbos for me? We don't ask. We even enforce it. Because, again, like the rabbi who's giving that class says, the person wanted a psak that he should be allowed, he shouldn't have to sleep with the breathing machine at night. The rabbi wouldn't hear of it. He goes even more than that. It's a great sin to be strict on yourself, to not violate the Shabbos in a case where your life is in danger. So there's no like, wow, you're so religious. Lies chassid ben shaita, to be what we would call a chassid, an idiot of a chassid. Why a chassid and an idiot? Because that's a foolish choice to try to think that you're being a more religious Jew by not violating the Shabbos, even though your life is in danger. So the reason we're using such harsh language is to emphasize the point to not behave this way. Because, like I said, like this person who wanted the breathing machine to be turned off on Shabbos, where if he wouldn't breathe properly, he could chas v'shalom die. And so the person thinks that they're being a pious person and not to be healed by something that's prohibited. And he quotes the verse about such a person, that God says that your blood that you would survive on, I'm going to demand accounting for. And you're going to have to explain why you wouldn't have violated the Torah, because it's not just applicable to Shabbos, right? If someone says that you could live if you eat, it was interesting. I went to a pharmacy over here, down the street from here, and there was a medicine, and on the medicine it said that there was an extract of swine, of pig. So the pharmacist himself was a Gentile, was an Arab Gentile. And they also do, I point out Arab because they also don't eat pig. And he said to me, listen, this is the medicine. This is what the pharmacist told me. Because the rabbanut means the the rabbis of Israel, means the Bezdin of Israel, have ruled that you're allowed to take it because you need the medicine. And even though there's an extract of swine, it's not a problem. But he says, between me and you, do you want to take pig? He says there's a generic version that you could take that may be not as good, but it doesn't have. I don't think you should be taking something with pig. This is the Arab pharmacist telling me again, because he also, so at the time it sounded okay, but like someone pointed out to me, that's not what the Torah says. If the Torah says you're allowed to take it, you should take it, then it's allowed to be taken. I say it's an Isser, there's a prohibition here. That's not the point. You have to see what the Torah says. So he v'hazor is lechalal. Now here the Shulchan Aruch adds a person who's diligent to transgress the Torah in order to keep this other person alive. It's praiseworthy. Again, the story that the Alter Rebbe went and cut trees and made a soup, a fire, and made a soup for this woman that just gave birth because he could have. Why did they asked him, why did you do it? Why didn't you send someone else to do it? You're the Rabbi. The Rabbi has to be the one to cut the wood and make it. He says, what do you mean? Of course, it's a mitzvah begadol. It's a mitzvah to do it. So the mitzvah has to be done by the greater the person, the greater the opportunity to show that this is a mitzvah. By asking someone who's not the rabbi to do it, you're kind of showing that you're not really supposed to be doing it. So therefore, I once was on a plane, and a person was, I don't, I'm not talking negative, but just the same idea. We were on a plane, and the person had a ticket to sit next to a woman. He didn't feel comfortable sitting next to a woman, so he asked someone else, who was also religious, if you mind switching with him. If it's not okay, why is it okay for you and why is it okay for him? Whatever. So that's the whole point. By saying this person could do it, that person can't be doing it, means it's wrong. But by the Alter Rebbe going and cutting the wood himself, he showed there's a mitzvah to do it because he's saving someone's life. Here, the Kitzur says, when it comes to someone's life, we're not talking about comfort, or like we paskin according to the Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, where someone's limb is in question. We're here talking about someone's life. Even if you have a Gentile, a Jew should do it. And if anyone transgresses, therefore, of course, I know Aaron and Barbara, you're in the medical field. This is by being out there, you're Parshat saving lives. It's a mitzvah. So and if a person transgresses the Shabbos for a person whose life is endangered, he gives an example that even if you've done it, you've transgressed, and it turned out that you weren't needed. He's going to give an example. So you shouldn't feel bad. Oh yeah, I transgressed the Shabbos at the end, they didn't need me. No, because at the time you didn't know that they didn't need you. So you still have, not only is it praiseworthy, you have reward for it. Gives an example. Let's say the doctor says, the sick person needs a dry fig. And so everyone has to go get figs, but he only needs one, or she only needs one. So 9 people ran, pulled off a fig from the tree, which is a transgression of Shabbos, to do that. But it only needs one. Now there's 9. So you could say that 8 people did an avera by mistake? No. Every single person that pulled off the fig for the sake of saving that person has sachar, has reward from Hashem. Even if the person already became healed by eating the first fig, and now by the time you showed up, it could even be by the time you even found the fig and pulled it off the tree, he was already better, or she was already better. It's not the point. You went with intention to help someone that was in a critical situation. Again, this applies to. That's why in the laws of medicine, at the end of the day, we're very lenient. It's just before we were talking about cases where a person just was uncomfortable. This applies to any situation of a life-threatening situation. This is the ruling. And again, the ruling is, you don't have to even think for a second, maybe someone else is going to get there before me, and maybe I shouldn't be doing it. That's not the calculation we have to make. Exactly, Jonathan said about Hatzalah. So he continues. Even if it's not, you don't have to sit there, like I told you, to be checking 100%, is this life-threatening? If it's not life-threatening, even if you think for a second it can be life-threatening, it's a suffix, it's in doubt. Mitzvah l'chal of Shabbos is still a commandment, to transgress the Shabbos to protect this person, to help this person who's in suffix, even in a doubt of life-threatening situation. You could transgress any biblical commandment. There is absolutely nothing that stands in front of a person's life. Torah was given. You're supposed to live with Torah, not to die for Torah, unless the Torah says so. You have to live. You don't die for Torah. There's only 3 cases that a person is told you die for the sake of Torah, which is, again, we're not learning the laws of Pekuach Nefesh over here, but he mentions it in the case of idol worship, of Avodah Zarah, Gilei Arayos, illicit sexual relationships that you're being forced to have. You're supposed to allow yourself to be killed and to have it willingly, or shvichas damim, or to kill someone, where your life is going to be killed if you don't kill someone else. You're not allowed to kill someone else to save your own life. Shehem those are the cases where you should allow yourself to be killed and not transgress. Again, this all applies. We're not learning the laws of Pekuach Nefesh. In the laws of Pekuach Nefesh, we would learn that it's also depending on the situation. We're not talking about it in health. We're talking about in the case of where someone comes to you and if it's a Zman Hashmad, but they're doing it in order to transgress Hashem, then there's another question if we die for even things that are not one of these 3 mitzvahs. But in a regular situation where a person's life is endangered, it's not about standing up and being Mekadesh and sanctifying God's name. It's talking about a question of saving someone's life. For instance, saving someone's life, a person's starving, right? You need to eat. You can't say that they shouldn't eat because it's not kosher food. There's no basis
right.
for that.
I think it's a good question, right? Whether you die or eat treif or something. Isn't that a close call? Whether you eat treif to save your life.
But again, if you save your life, it's not even a close call. If it's to save your life, there's no question. My grandfather tells the story. My grandfather tells the story when he was in the camps. He was first in Auschwitz, then he was taken to labor camp. So he was, I don't think it was Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah, I'm not sure when it was, but it was towards the end of the war. He was starving, and he tells me the German soldiers threw him a bone. Like you throw an animal. It wasn't kosher, of course. There was no questions of kosher. There was no kosher. There was no hashkacha in Auschwitz. Everyone you had to eat. There was no pekuach nefesh. It's not even a question. Okay. Let's see the footnotes on this. We have a few footnotes. Number 1. Oh, okay. Let's see what we're talking about over here. The laws of Shabbos are suspended where there's a life-threatening situation. So let's see the criteria in number 1. Okay, he's going into the question of hutra or dichui. Okay, there's suspended, or more literally, the word dechuya means pushed aside, as opposed to hutra, made permissible. If you remember, the language we said at the end of last chapter was that a person who's bedridden, to have a Gentile cook for you. And the question is bishulakim, like Aaron pointed out, Gentile cooking. He says it's mutter. It's been made permissible. He uses the word heter. There's a difference between the word dochui and heter. This is a question in many cases of Torah. Right, at the beginning of this week's Parsha, we all open up the law of Tazria. Right, how does the Parsha talk? It talks about the laws of the circumcision. We learn from the laws of circumcision that you're allowed to circumcise on Shabbos, even though circumcising on Shabbos is causing someone to bleed, which you're not allowed to do willingly. It means, why don't we just push off the bris to Sunday? Why do you have to have it on Shabbos? Because Mila Bizmana, to have circumcision in its proper time, pushes away. What's that, Jonathan?
Bris Milah is an elsa, right? So Shabbos is an elsa, Bris Milah is another. So I can see why it's still for Shabbos. Okay, if it's an os,
Yes, yes.
Like Shabbos is an os, and
exactly. But the question we're emphasizing over here is the emphasis duchya, which means suspended, or hutra means permissible. So let's see what he wants to teach us over here. Suspended, more literally, the word duchya means pushed aside, as opposed to hutra, made permissible. There's a great controversy among the poskim as to the attitude we take in permitting the transgressions of Shabbos to save a life, whether it is duchya or hutra. Means, is Shabbos still there, but the life overrides the situation, and therefore it's pushed aside, or if it's hutra, it's made permissible. Shulchan Aruch Harav 328:13, and this author maintain that it is duchya, and therefore, if a method can possibly be found to minimize the transgressions, such as a malacha with a shinoi, in other words, in an unusual manner, that is the preferable way. Meaning to say, if the Alter Rebbe and the Kitzur says it's duchya, so it means if it's pushed aside, you always have to be conscious that it's being pushed aside. So can I do it in a way that's less violating the Shabbos? Then I should. If I could do a shinoi, do a shinoi. If I could do it in a way that's not regular, do it in a way that's not regular. If it's become permissible, then I don't even have to think that way. There's no Shabbos here. The Tzemach Tzedek and the Tashbat Magen Avraham, you have to check this. This Tzemach Tzedek is again the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, right? So we're talking about the grandson of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe says is duchya from the Lashon Aruch Shulchan Aruch. The Tzemach Tzedek, which is his grandson, and the Tashbitz and the Magen Avraham hold hutra, meaning say there's no need to seek ways to minimize the transgression. There is no Shabbos in this situation. Doesn't mean you could have a cigarette or turn on your television because you're anyways helping someone. Some people think that it's not like Jonathan was saying. The Hatzalah person doesn't mean that just because you're violating the Shabbos for things that are not.
Is that
Doesn't mean that you
possible?
could just hold on, Jonathan. Doesn't mean you could just do everything else. But in the healing itself, do you have to consider to try to find a way to minimize the transgression? Hold on, let's just finish the footnote, and then we'll get to Rebecca, and then we'll get to Jonathan. The Chelkas Yaakov writes, another authority, that where a definite danger exists, means it's not even like it's mamish clear, this person's life is in danger, you shouldn't even be thinking about easier ways to less transgress the Shabbos. It's hustra, but where there's a doubt, it's a suffix as whether the situation is life-threatening, then it's the. So the Chelkas Yaakov kind of bridges it together and says that in a case where it's clearly a case of life and death, then Shabbos is pushed. It's hutar. It's permissible. If it's a question, well, then it's the chuya. Again, this is a shaila in Torah in general. Whenever, for instance, shatnez. Shatnez means we're not allowed to mix clothing that have linen and wool. All the Kohanim's clothing had linen and wool. So what's the reason? So there's a machlekes between the Rambam and the Ravid. If it's hutra, dechuya means because it's the Beis Hamikdash, does the Beis Hamikdash override it, or in the Beis Hamikdash there is no such law? That is a question throughout Torah about when we're allowed to do something. Is it dechuya or hutra? Is it pushed aside? Meaning, if it's pushed aside, means it's still there, but there's a stronger force that we have to focus on. Therefore, if we could do it in a lesser of a transgression, we consider that. Or if it's hutra, there is nothing to be considered because it's not. So it's this laws of Shabbos, let's say, doesn't apply in this case. Yes, Rebecca, you're on mute.
So like a Tzala guy who takes someone to the hospital on Shabbos, like how is he allowed to like drive and do malacha to then get himself back home on Shabbos?
Okay, first of all, you have to know something. I don't want to get into the laws of Atzal because laws of Atzal are very. You have to be a good Rav for that, and I'm not.
I read the book.
What?
I read the book on that subject.
Hold on, Aaron. So, for instance, in London, there's a special Rav that's the Rav of Atzal. In general, the rule is that in these situations, you wouldn't be able to continue doing your job if every time you take someone to the hospital, you have to.
Right. Also, I heard once that people wouldn't do this job if they had to stay in the hospital in order to if they couldn't go back home, then they wouldn't do this job.
That's what I'm saying. So
I'll just say what it said simply. You're saving a life, do it as you normally would on the way there. But once you saved a life, you have to drive home safely. But when you put the key in the ignition, you do it in an unusual way. When you do certain things, but when it comes to driving home, don't make it more dangerous because you want to do it in an unusual way. But be safe. And for what she said, they had to make these rulings so that people would go back because they even need the bus for the next patient.
Yeah. So I'm saying again, this is the question of hutra techuya, which is means if you're taking, let's say, the Tzemach Tzedek's opinion, which is he's what we call the achron. So usually when you have the rule of thumb is if you have a reliable posek who's seen everyone else and gives a ruling, we go with that person because he's seen everything else, all the arguments, and still came to the conclusion. So we go with that. If the Tzemach Tzedek says it's hutra, hold on, John. Jonathan, hold on. If we're saying it's hutra, so then then kind of we
The
just
book I used was Hatzalah's Shabbat book, the rules of Hatzalah during Shabbat.
okay. Yeah, excellent. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, Rebecca and Aaron stole my thunder. Yes, I meant to say, is it correct them to rush to the scene on Shabbos, but wrong or right them to ride back home?
Say that again.
Is it correct them to rush to the scene, but wrong to drive back home?
No. It depends who you are. If you're a Hatzalah person, we're not talking about, for instance, the rule of about what about a husband who goes with his wife to give birth. This is he has to walk back. It's not you're not. There are people that are professional. Let's say Aaron is a professional nurse, or Barbara is a professional nurse. There's people that their profession is medicine. You have people that are in circumstances brings them to violate the Shabbos, right? You're there on the scene. You're not a doctor. You're going to help the person, but you're not going to be called on for another case. You didn't become a doctor overnight just because you helped someone. As great as a mitzvah it is, it's very important you help that person, but it doesn't make you a qualified doctor, right? So going forward, it doesn't mean you have the right to violate the Shabbos to go home unless that's the only way you would that again in the circumstances. But a Hatzalah person, 24/7, they're on call. And 24/7, like Aaron says, you go from one case to the next case. Today you just took someone to the hospital for childbirth, and tomorrow for another severe situation. So it's a Hatzalah person. And again, but for the Hatzalah, I don't want to give a ruling in general for the Hatzalah because the Hatzalah have very much they have each Hatzalah has their poisik, the Rav, who gives them the guidelines and the rules and updates them of the different technologies and different things of how they deal with. So they have a special, there's a special person usually that's dedicated to each Hatzalah locally to give the psak. And so I'm not just going to try to dabble in that. That's out of my league.
What about a doctor who has a psak that he can be on call on Shabbos to save people's lives?
Of course.
They do.
He's allowed to go home after?
Yeah, again, so yeah, again, I think the doctor, I think if that's your profession, it's like kind of the laws of Hatzalah.
Okay.
Again, I don't want to pass in offhand, but 'cause again, there's like Aaron says, there's a special book on it, and there's a special psakim on this. But in general, I believe that a professional that's on call is I think, and I don't want to just say
Okay,
it.
my rabbi says this because we've had it in our shul. Whatever you can do to save a life, and if that means you have to get home in a normal way that's not Shabbat like, you saved a life. You did a bigger mitzvah than Shabbos.
Okay, yeah, but the question is, it's all, like I said, it depends if you're the professional or not. If you just the circumstances brought you into that situation. Yes, Barbara.
I was just gonna say, well, for doctors though, they do have a sleep room. So if they needed to stay at the hospital and it's Shabbos, they wouldn't have to go home because they would have a place to sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but a doctor who has a family might not want to spend his Shabbos sleeping, just hanging out in the hospital room. He probably wants to spend Shabbos with his family after he helped the patient.
So I agree with Rebecca. I think again, I have to check the laws of this is more for professionals with different versus regular person. But I think Rebecca is right that anything that would prevent the person from taking a call because of the consequences and you're a professional, because if you're a person on the scene, you're on the scene. Well, you're talking about like, I'm turning my phone off because if I take the call, then I have to be stuck in the sleep room. I don't want to do that.
Okay, so let me just say this. So a lot of family members, and my daughter's going to go into pre-med. So when you do your residency, some people try to get the one that respects the Jew and not make him work on Shabbos. But sometimes you have to spend those hours in Shabbos. And so there's a whole, you work with your Rabbi, and they work the whole thing out to make
Yeah,
it kosher.
Yeah, but also if you go to Einstein Montefiore in the Bronx, they have Shomer Shabbos residencies.
Right. So give me luck that my daughter will get in there.
Yeah, I hope she does.
What does that mean?
Well, a lot of doctors are Jewish anyway, some even religious.
But
Now, listen,
also a lot of them live, it's like they live on the same campus where the hospital is, so they can, if necessary, I guess they can just walk home. They live right near the hospital. But I think somehow like I think they get non-Jews to take the rotations that are on Shabbos. I think that's how they do it.
listen, I want to say something. When the war broke out in on Shabbos Zachar, right? It was 8 o'clock in the morning, Jerusalem time. We got our first alarm. So the system that they have over here, we'll finish off with this. We'll have to kind of go back to the footnotes. Barbara, if you can remember, I think we're holding footnote number 2. So the alarms went off on about 8:30 in the morning on Shabbos. Nothing happened. The alarms were because to let people know that something is possibly going to happen. Now, the alarm system they have over here is if there's an attack from Iran, you don't have to be signed up for any program. Any phone will get an alert, whether you're signed up or not. Israel has your number, whether you're an American number or a Chinese number or an Israeli number. If you have a phone in Israel, you're going to get an alarm. That's just the way it works. How the technology of it's not my understanding. But what happened was that same Shabbos in the morning, many people came to shul with phones in their pocket. I know rabbis came to shul with the phones in the pocket. Again, these are questions, and until today, if you're going to be in shul, you'll hear all of a sudden people's phones buzzing. Shomer Shabbos, people's phones buzzing. Does that mean because they have to get the alert and run home? Because if you don't have the phone, then your only way of knowing if incoming rocket will be when the alarm goes on, and then it's seconds until you have to get home. If you have a phone and you have an alarm, you get at least 5, 10, 15 minutes sometimes, so you can make it. That's you have an emergency. So there's all kind of it's not so simple. I'm not, God forbid, I don't think, if anyone feels the need to go to shul with the phone, so they should have, if you just want to be the one who knows the information, it's not going to make a difference. You have to really ask yourself if you should be carrying a phone. All right, everyone, let's pick this up next week. Laila Tov, and have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.